People remember 1918 for the war ending, the armistice, the parades, the boys coming home. They forget about the other killer that year, the one that didn't care about uniforms or borders or which side you fought for. The Spanish flu, though it wasn't Spanish at all, just the Spanish newspapers were the only ones honest enough to report it. I'm recording this in 1963. My name is Margaret Elizabeth Chen. I was 26 years old in 1918, working as a nurse at Base Hospital 45 in France, about 15 miles behind the front lines. I'd volunteered with the American Expeditionary Forces in 1917, thought I'd be treating wounded soldiers, shrapnel wounds, bullet injuries, surgery cases. I did treat those, but what I remember most, what still wakes me up at night 45 years later, is the influenza ward. I grew up in San Francisco, daughter of Chinese immigrants who ran a laundry on Grant Avenue. My parents wanted me to marry well, help with the family business. But I wanted to be a nurse. Went to nursing school against their wishes, graduated in 1914. When America entered the war in 1917, I saw the recruitment posters. Nurses needed overseas. They were desperate enough that they didn't care I was Chinese. Desperate enough to overlook a lot of things. I arrived in France in January 1918. Base Hospital 45 was a collection of wooden barracks and canvas tents near the town of Savenay. We handled casualties from the front, men with missing limbs, gas burns, shrapnel wounds, shell shock. I thought I'd seen the worst humanity could do to itself. Then came September 1918. The influenza arrived like a storm. One day we had the usual cases, war wounded mostly. The next day, men started arriving with fevers, couldn't breathe, coughing blood. Within hours, they'd be dead. At first, we thought it was gas exposure, some new German weapon. Took us days to realize the truth. This wasn't a weapon. This was a plague, and it was killing more men than the war ever could. By October, we'd converted 3 entire barracks into influenza wards. They weren't enough. Not nearly enough. I worked in Ward C. That's where the worst cases went. The ones who were drowning in their own lungs. I can still hear them. All of them. Every single one. September 15th, 1918. That's when I first saw it. Really saw it. Private Robert Mitchell from Ohio, 22 years old. He'd come to us 3 days earlier with a minor shrapnel wound to his shoulder. Healing well, due to return to his unit. That morning, he complained of a headache. By noon, he had a fever of 104. By evening, he was coughing up blood. By midnight, he was dead. 12 hours, from healthy to dead in 12 hours. We didn't understand. Influenza wasn't supposed to kill like that. Influenza was what old people got, what children with weak lungs succumbed to. Not healthy young men in the prime of their lives. But this wasn't ordinary influenza. The speed was terrifying. Men would be fine one moment, then collapse the next. The fever would spike, 105, 106 degrees. Their faces would turn dusky blue from lack of oxygen. They'd gasp for air like drowning men, which is exactly what they were, drowning in the fluid filling their lungs. By September 20th, we had 40 cases in the influenza ward. By September 25th, we had over 200. The wounded soldiers from the front, the ones with bullet wounds and missing limbs, they were being moved to other facilities to make room. The flu patients needed more space, more beds, more everything. We didn't have it. Dr. Patterson, he was the chief medical officer. He called us together on September 26th. 8 nurses, 6 doctors, a handful of orderlies. We were exhausted already, running on maybe 3 hours of sleep a night. He looked worse than we did. "This is going to get bad," he said. "Worse than bad. Worse than anything we've seen. The French hospitals are overwhelmed. The British too. And it's spreading faster than we can track it." He was right. He was so right. By the end of September, half our medical staff was sick. 2 nurses dead. 1 doctor. The flu didn't care that we were trying to help. It took us just as readily as it took the soldiers. Nurse Helen Morrison from Boston. We'd trained together, shared a tent, became close friends. She started feeling ill on September 28th, insisted she was fine, kept working. By September 30th, she couldn't get out of bed. October 2nd, she was in Ward C, struggling to breathe. I held her hand while she died on October 3rd. She was 24 years old. We'd been joking about what we'd do after the war just a week before. She wanted to open a practice in Boston, get married, have children. The flu took all of that in 5 days. That's when I realized this wasn't just an outbreak. This was something else entirely, something that would kill more than the war, something we had no idea how to stop. October was hell, pure hell. Ward C held 120 beds. By the second week of October, we had over 200 patients crammed in there. Men lying on the floor, in the hallways, anywhere we could find space. And still they kept coming. The smell is what hit you first when you entered. Blood, vomit, human waste, disinfectant that couldn't quite mask the underlying stench of death. We tried to keep it clean, but with that many dying patients and so few staff, it was impossible. The sound was worse. Constant coughing, wet, rattling coughs that brought up blood and pieces of lung tissue. Men gasping for air, making this horrible sucking sound as they tried to breathe through fluid-filled lungs. Moaning, crying, some calling for their mothers, some praying, some just screaming. I worked 18, 20-hour shifts. We all did. There was no choice. We'd move from bed to bed, trying to do something, anything. Give them water, adjust their pillows, hold their hands. Most of the time, that's all we could do. Hold their hands while they drowned. The worst was how it killed them. The hemorrhaging. Their lungs would fill with blood and fluid. We'd see it pouring from their noses, their mouths. Some would cough so hard they'd tear blood vessels in their eyes. By the end, many of them would turn this dark mahogany color from the cyanosis. Lack of oxygen turning their skin purple-black. Corporal James Yates from Georgia, he was 19, arrived in Ward C on October 8th. Strong kid, athlete, thought he'd fight it off. But the flu attacked strong immune systems hardest, turned them against the patient. Within 2 days, his lungs were completely filled with fluid. He couldn't lie down because he'd drown, had to sit up, gasping, drowning while sitting upright. I sat with him the night he died, held his hand. He kept trying to apologize. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he kept saying. "I'm sorry for the trouble," like it was his fault, like he'd chosen to get sick. He died just before dawn on October 10th. I closed his eyes, tagged him for the morgue, and moved to the next bed. There was always a next bed. Private David Wong. He was Chinese, like me, from Sacramento. We'd talked sometimes, in between the horror, in those brief moments when things were almost quiet. He'd enlisted to prove he was American, to prove Chinese men could fight for their country. Got through the whole war without a scratch. The flu got him in 3 days. I was there when he died too, October 12th. He was 21 years old. His last words were in Cantonese, calling for his mother. I was the only one who understood him. That haunts me still. We were losing 20, 30 men a day. The morgue couldn't keep up. Bodies stacked in the back rooms waiting for burial. We'd wrap them in sheets when we had sheets. When we ran out, we just stacked them, like cordwood. The orderlies would come through twice a day with a cart, load up the dead, take them away. We didn't have time for last rites, for dignity, for anything. Just tag them and move on. I became numb to it. Had to. If you thought too hard about what was happening, about these boys surviving the war only to die from the flu, about their families back home waiting for them to come home, about the sheer waste of it all, you'd break down. And we couldn't afford to break down. So I stopped feeling, stopped thinking, just moved from bed to bed, hour after hour, day after day, watching them die. The worst part was how helpless we were. We were medical professionals, trained, educated, experienced, and we couldn't do a damn thing. There was no treatment, no cure, no medicine that worked. We tried everything. Aspirin for the fever didn't help. Oxygen, when we had it, which wasn't often, barely made a difference. We tried bloodletting, tried various tonics and remedies. Tried experimental serums from other hospitals. Nothing worked. All we could do was watch them die. Dr. Patterson tried to stay optimistic, but even he was breaking. I saw him one night in mid-October, standing outside Ward C, just crying, silent tears running down his face. He'd lost 12 patients that day, 12, and there was nothing he could have done differently. We started getting letters from home. The flu had spread there too, was spreading everywhere. My parents wrote from San Francisco. The city was overwhelmed, hospitals full, bodies piling up. They'd turned the Civic Auditorium into a morgue. My mother's letter was short, matter of fact in that way she had. But between the lines, I could read the terror. The war was still going on. Men were still being wounded at the front, but the flu was killing more. We knew it. Everyone knew it, and nobody could stop it. I got sick on October 18th, woke up with a headache, fever by noon. I knew what it meant. Thought, this is it. This is how I die. Not from a shell or a gas attack, but from something I can't even see. I kept working. Didn't tell anyone. If I went to bed, who would take care of the patients? We were already short-staffed. I couldn't abandon them. I lasted 3 days before I collapsed. Woke up in a bed in Ward C, the same ward I'd been working in, surrounded by the same sounds, the same smells. But now I was the patient. Now I was the one drowning. Nurse Catherine Mills, sweet girl from Oregon, only 22. She took care of me, did for me what I'd been doing for all the others, held my hand, gave me water, whispered that I'd be fine, that I'd pull through. I don't know if she believed it. I didn't. The fever peaked at 105. I remember hallucinating, seeing faces of the men who died, David Wong, James Yates, Helen Morrison, all of them standing around my bed, waiting for me to join them. But I didn't die. Don't know why. Some people lived. Most didn't. There was no rhyme or reason to it. Young, old, healthy, sick. The flu took whoever it wanted. I survived. Took me 2 weeks to get back on my feet. Lost 15 pounds. Felt weak for months afterward, but I survived. Went right back to work. What else was I going to do? November 11th, 1918. The armistice, the war ended. We heard the bells ringing from the nearby town, heard the shouting, the celebrations. The war was over, 4 years of slaughter, and it was finally over. In Ward C, we barely noticed. We had 180 patients that day, influenza cases, most of them dying. The war ending didn't mean anything to them, didn't change the fact that they couldn't breathe, that their lungs were filling with blood, that they were drowning in their own bodies. Private Thomas Sullivan from Boston. He died at 11:15 a.m. on November 11th, 15 minutes after the armistice took effect, 20 years old. Survived the trenches, survived the gas attacks, survived 4 years of war. The flu killed him 15 minutes into peacetime. I remember thinking, what was the point? What was any of it for? The celebrations continued outside. People were dancing, drinking, crying with relief. The boys were coming home. The nightmare was over. Except it wasn't. Not for us. Not in Ward C. The flu didn't care about the armistice. It kept killing, kept spreading. We had our worst week in mid-November, 53 deaths in 7 days. 53. After the war had ended, the troops started going home. Transport ships leaving from French ports, packed with soldiers heading back to America. And they were taking the flu with them, spreading it to every port, every city, every town they touched. We tried to warn them. Dr. Patterson wrote reports, sent telegrams, told the brass that they were creating a disaster, that they needed to quarantine the sick, that they needed to slow down the demobilization. They ignored him. The war was over. The boys needed to come home. Public morale required it. Political pressure demanded it. So they packed sick soldiers onto ships with healthy ones, sent them home to their families, to their communities. The flu spread like wildfire. By December, we were getting reports from America. The second wave was hitting, worse than the first. Cities shutting down, schools closing, people dying in the streets. The death toll was staggering, and there was nothing we could do. Nothing. I worked through December, through January. The case numbers finally started dropping in February 1919. By March, the worst seemed to be over. Ward C was converted back to a surgical ward. We went back to treating war wounds, except there weren't any more war wounds, just the lingering effects of the flu. I left France in April 1919, sailed home to San Francisco. The city I'd left 2 years earlier was different, quieter, sadder. Everyone had lost someone, everyone. My parents had survived, but my younger brother hadn't. He died in October 1918, 22 years old, the flu. I wasn't there. I'd been in France, saving strangers, while my own brother died alone in San Francisco. It's 1963 now, 45 years since the influenza pandemic. I'm 71 years old, and I've spent most of my life trying to process what happened in 1918. The numbers are staggering, 50 million dead worldwide. Some estimates go higher, 70, maybe 100 million. More than the war killed, more than any war had ever killed, and it happened in less than 2 years. At Base Hospital 45, we lost over 800 patients to the flu. 800. That's not counting the staff we lost. 5 nurses, 3 doctors, countless orderlies and support staff. I kept working as a nurse after I came home. Worked in San Francisco hospitals for 30 years. Saw a lot. Helped a lot of people. But I never forgot Ward C. Never forgot the sounds, the smells, the faces. The nightmares lasted for decades, still come sometimes. I'll wake up, and for a moment I'm back there, moving from bed to bed, watching young men drown in their own lungs. I can hear them calling for help, hear the wet, rattling coughs, smell the blood and disinfectant. I never married. People ask why. I tell them I was too busy with my career, which is true. But the real reason is that I couldn't. How could I build a life, have children, pretend things were normal when I'd seen what I'd seen, when I knew how fragile everything was, when I knew that invisible things could kill millions and we couldn't stop it? The world forgot about the flu. People wanted to forget. The war got all the attention, the memorials, the monuments, the history books, but the flu killed more, killed faster, killed indiscriminately. We learned nothing from it. That's what bothers me most. By the 1920s, people had moved on. No serious investigation into what caused it, how to prevent it. The medical establishment barely acknowledged it. It was embarrassing. All those doctors, all that knowledge, and we were helpless. I think about the patients sometimes. Robert Mitchell, who died in 12 hours. Helen Morrison, my friend. James Yates, apologizing as he died. David Wong, calling for his mother in Cantonese. Thomas Sullivan, who died 15 minutes into peace. My brother, whose name was also Thomas. All the others whose names I've forgotten. They deserve better, deserve treatment that worked, deserve to live, deserve to be remembered. But the world moved on. The Roaring '20s, the Great Depression, another world war. The flu pandemic became a footnote, something people mentioned in passing, if at all. I'm recording this because someone should remember, should know what it was really like, not the statistics, not the dry historical accounts, the reality of watching hundreds of young men drown in their own lungs while you stood helpless, the reality of working until you collapsed, the reality of seeing your friends die, your patients die, your brother die. The war ended in 1918. But for those of us in Ward C, the nightmare continued for months afterward, and in many ways, it never really ended. I survived, but part of me died in that ward, the part that believed medicine could save everyone, the part that believed we were in control, the part that believed the world made sense. I'm 71 years old now. I've lived a long life, helped a lot of people. But I never stopped seeing those faces, never stopped hearing those sounds, never stopped smelling that smell. The Spanish flu of 1918, the pandemic that killed 50 million people, the disaster that the world forgot. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. I was there. I saw it. I lived through it. And I'll carry Ward C with me until the day I die.